Hildegard, that's my seat, and I gotta film. Come on. Shoot. Get out of my chair. I'm fine. Holy chair. Hello, and welcome to our... No, this isn't gonna work, Cat. You gotta go. Hello, welcome back to our morality class. Now I know we've been doing this digital school thing instead of physical school for a few days now, and I know the thing a lot of you guys are missing most, more than anything else, is taking quizzes. So today I have something special prepared for you. We're going to start class with a quiz. Yes, I'm serious. No, I'm not kidding. Take a minute now, take out a piece of paper, or in a new tab, open up a fresh Google Doc. Please put your name on top and number it 1 through 5. It's going to be a 5-question quiz. I'll give you a second right now to get yourself set up. Feel free to pause the video if you need. Piece of paper, Google Doc, name, numbers 1 through 5 on the paper, please. Take a second and get yourself ready. So, at this point, we'll begin our quiz. And, by the way, no cheating and no changing your answers. You might get away with it because we're not doing this live, but honestly, what does it say about you if you have to cheat on a morality quiz, right? So, question number 1. What is the basic building block of all life? That's right, this is a question you probably learned about in biology, so think back to your Mr. Broder class. What is the basic building block of all life? Number 2. Question number 2. What is the basic building block, the basic unit of society? If the last question was from biology, this one's from social studies or political philosophy. What is the basic building block, the basic unit of a society, of a country or a nation? Number 3, what are the 2 relationships that every single human being has? Give you a second to scratch your head over that one. Number 3, what are the 2 relationships that every single human being has? There are exactly 2 of them. Number 4, true or false? Because what would a Mr. Hollowell quiz be without at least one tricky true-false question? You ready for this one? Number 4, true or false? What's good for the parts is good for the whole. If that sounds a little abstract, then you're hearing me correctly. What's good for the parts is good for the whole. True or false? Number 5, who do you love? Come on, you know I always try to put at least one easy question on there, right? Otherwise, these would be just too hard. So number 5, who do you love? Quick recap in case you missed a question. Number 1, what's the basic building block or unit of all life? Number 2, what's the basic building block or unit of societies? Number 3, what are the 2 relationships that every single human being has? Number 4, true or false? What's good for the parts is good for the whole. And number 5, who do you love? Pens down. Please step away from the paper or put it away or step away from that fresh Google Doc you just made. Here's what's going on. We are going to go over this quiz, don't worry. No, you're not going to submit it for a grade. I just needed you to listen attentively and carefully to those questions and think about those concepts. Why did I start with a quiz I'm not going to grade? Because we need those ideas in your head to make sense of where we're going. See, we're about to introduce and understand the 4th commandment. That's right, this is the next in our series of going through the commandments. But we're not ready to understand the 4th commandment. Coming from where you and I come from in our society, we need to do a little rehabilitation, a little remedial work, a little common sense thinking about what this commandment is about. So what we're going to do for the remainder of the lecture is go over the quiz. We're going to explain each answer. And when we're done explaining and you're caught up and you understand why the right answers are what they are, then we'll be ready to understand the fourth commandment in context. And I want you to notice that phrase. It's going to come up several times in this evening's lecture. In context is going to be key to understanding the fourth commandment. So, let's go through your quiz and we'll see how you did. So, question number 1. What's the basic building block of all life? This is a biology question. And the correct answer is cells. You guys probably knew this one. Mr. Broder's going to be proud of you that he got it right. But we want to understand why. Why is it that cells are the basic building block of all life? And the answer is very logical and very simple. They're the smallest thing that can do all of the functions necessary for life. If you look at any one of those subcellular structures, those things you had to diagram and maybe make a diorama of in your bio class, you realize no one of them is enough to sustain life. Cell membranes can't stay alive on their own. Where are they going to get their energy to work? Mitochondria can't stay alive on their own. Where are they going to get the nutrients to turn into energy? Even the nucleus, which you might think of as the most important part, can't operate on its own. I mean, a free-floating lone nucleus is an organizing principle that has nothing to organize and no power by which to execute its principle. It's useless. You need all of these things taken together in order to have something that can sustain the various functions for life. The very simple proof of this is that cells can reproduce and subcellular parts can't. Free-floating mitochondria don't reproduce. Free-floating Golgi bodies don't reproduce. But single cells do reproduce. There's a logical corollary to this, a subsequent idea to this that follows upon it that we're going to need to have our head around for the remainder of this lecture, and it's this. Every subcellular part, every little part that goes into the cell that ever existed came from a cell. It was made in the context of a cell. The parts come into an already existing cell. And then they can go on and exist and do their various functions. We need that concept down because we're going to be using it for the rest of the lecture. So if you need to play back and remember how cells work, go for it. But we are going to be drawing heavily from the image of a cell for the remainder of the lecture. Everyone ready for number 2? I'm guessing most of you are on track to get 100 right now. I'm guessing most of you got number 1 wrong. Number 2, however, is much trickier. The question was, what's the basic building block, the fundamental unit, if you will, of a society, of a nation, or a village, or a community, at whatever organizational level we think of it? What's the thing out of which societies are made? And the answer is, of course, a family. Now, I'm going to guess that many of you got it wrong, and you wrote an individual or a person, and that is totally incorrect. But it's an understandable mistake. First, I'm going to prove to you why family is correct, and then I'm going to explain to you why many of you came up with the wrong answer. First, think about a family. Think about a cell. The reason the cell is the basic building block is because it can do all the functions, and therefore it can reproduce. An individual, simply put, can't reproduce. One person does not make another person. You need multiple people for that, and you need them in a certain relationship. We'll talk more about that later. An individual cannot carry out all of the functions of a society. You need a community of people to do that, right? It's a family. The basic building block out of which societies, at the massive level of huge empires, and at the tiny level of little villages and tribes that no one's ever heard of, no matter what, they are always made up of families. Now think back to our corollary. In the cell, we said, no subcellular part, no nucleus or no mitochondrion, ever came into existence outside the context of a cell. Here's what I'm proposing to you. No human being ever came into being, was ever conceived, or was ever born outside of the context of some kind of family. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean family how we always think of it, and we're going to pick that apart later. But every human came from some previous pair of humans. You and I aren't the equivalent of the cell. We're the equivalent of a nucleus or a mitochondrion. The family is the cell. That's the part that we can reproduce. So why? Why did so many of you write individual or person or a citizen, maybe, if you're thinking more in terms of poli-sci? There's two good reasons for this. And one, it's the philosophy that our society is based on. I mean, the idea and the philosophical principles that undergird the Constitution and the American Revolution are the same philosophical principles of the Enlightenment. It's the philosophies of the 1700s for the most part. And it has an obsession with the individual over the community. That seems to have worked well for us as a country so far, but it also admits of particular problems. And I want to show you one problem that's endemic in our society that also explains why you might have been so strongly inclined towards the individual instead of the family. And the reason is advertising. That's right. I'm guessing that's surprising for most of you. One of the reasons you thought of an individual before you thought of a family is advertising. See, here's why. If I'm a big company that wants to target you, manipulate you, really deceive you and use you into giving me your money for something you don't really need, I have to appeal to you. Well, how am I going to appeal to a whole family? Wouldn't it be much easier if I could rip them apart from each other first? Think about, I don't know, what your grandparents or great-grandparents might have done. They might have all sat on a couch together and watched the one family television, and there were advertisements on it. But the whole family sitting there together, dad and mom and multiple kids. What's an advertiser going to say that's going to appeal to that whole family? Everyone's got different interests. But if you're a really sneaky, really manipulative, really successful advertiser, you're going to first rip those people apart from each other. And how are you going to do it? By giving each one of them their individual screens in different rooms of the house. So that you can appeal to dad on being a strong, successful man, and mom on her particular interests, and you can appeal to your older sister on her laptop, and your younger brother on, I don't know, whatever app or program he's using. If you first divide them from each other, rip the family apart into individuals, which is supposed to be some kind of great thing, then you can manipulate each of them separately and milk way more money out of them for stuff they don't need. Who cares that it doesn't make them happy? Living in a world saturated by individualistic advertising forces you to think of yourself as an individual rather than as a community member because that's what they need you to do. Sorry, you've been manipulated. And good thing you guys don't subscribe to anything or follow anything that's entirely ad-based, right? You don't subject yourself to things that are free if they're advertising-driven. That would be dangerous. It might be harming you and your family and your relationships. But anyway, I'll get off that rant for a little while. Back to the key principle. The organizing principle of society is not the individual. It's the family. That's the context in which every human being comes into existence. So, question number 3. What are the 2 relationships, and there are exactly 2 of them, that every single human being has? I hinted at this a little bit in our last section. The answer is mother and father. The only relationships to another human being every human is guaranteed to have are to a mother and to a father. Why? Because that's how sexual reproduction works. That's what it means that we're mammals, honestly. You might not have a very good relationship with mother and father. I'm not saying that everything's hunky-dory in that particular emotional and psychological aspect of your life, but you have a mother. You have a father. You might have extra people filling these roles. It's not necessary that your biological parents are the same people who raised you, or the same people who you look up to as role models now. I mean, in the obvious case of adoption, you have something like extra parents, right? But you do still have parents. Everybody does. Not everybody's got siblings. Not everyone's got siblings. Not everyone's got aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever other relationships. Not everybody has friends. Sorry, Everyone has parents. And if you're looking at the technicality and trying to catch me on it that everyone also has grandparents because they have parents, then you've proved my point. Grandparents are a function of parents, are a function of their parents, etc., going backwards. It's just more evidence that the parental-child relationship is fundamental. After all, what does it mean to be someone's siblings? You're children of the same parents. Make sense? Essential relationship. Mother, father, woman, man. That, then, is going to be our definition for family. And I know that's not going to sit well with all of you, and I know a couple of you are going to be uncomfortable with this, but hear me out. There is a logic to this position, and it goes like this. Think back to our cell. Why is the cell the organizing principle of living things? Because it can carry out all the different functions with different parts. It can reproduce, and it can reproduce things that can also generate those separate parts. What it takes to form a family is a man and a woman who are willing to come together to reproduce. The definition for family, the fundamental basis on which all family arises, is marriage. Man and woman who come together and are willing to reproduce. I'm not trying to be old-fashioned or homophobic or anything else. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to be logical and logically consistent. A cell is the organizing principle of life because it can reproduce and carry out all the life functions with the different parts. A family is the fundamental building block of society, and the members of the family must be able to come together and reproduce. And again, I can hear a couple of you trying to come at me with the technicality. Doesn't that mean that infertile couples aren't families because they can't reproduce? No. You've made a logical leap that's not actually there. A cell that happens to have a genetic defect, so it can't reproduce, is still a cell. It's a cell that's missing something. But that's very, very different than, say, a scientist in a lab taking a whole bunch of mitochondria only from several different cells and lumping them all together in one space and trying to say that that was a cell. One of them should have the potential, and there's been some defect. The other never had the potential in the first place. That's why this is what we mean by marriage, a man and a woman. That's our definition for family in the sense that the reproduction is there, and the multiple complementary functions. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Are there. They work together, they go together, and it's in that context that all new people are born. Mother and father. Husband and wife. Marriage is the basis for family. Number 4 sounded pretty abstract, but I'm hoping it was a pretty easy question. The question is this: true or false? What's good for the parts is good for the whole. And this should be pretty obviously true. Let me give you a really simple demonstration of this principle at work. Your house, the one you're sitting in right now as you watch this lecture, is made primarily of wood. What's really, really bad for wood? Fire. How well does your house do if it's on fire? It's bad for the whole because it's bad for the parts. Think again of your body. What's it made of? Cells. Yeah, I know we're going deep on that cell theme today. Your body consists of cells. What are some things that are really bad for cells? Starvation, dehydration, extreme heat, viral infection. Anybody? Do we realize that these are also causes of death? Why do these things kill your body? Because they kill your cells. What's bad for the parts is intrinsically bad for the whole. And what's good for the parts is good for the whole. There's a corollary from this. Another logical step that helps us make sense of it. The function of a body is to protect cells from these things. Why do cells start lumping themselves into large, complicated organisms rather than staying singular cellular? So they have an advantage. A single cell can only perceive what's immediately around it and hope that it's not danger and hope that it is food. And if it isn't, it's just going to die. You can see danger coming from miles off and smell food from a large distance away. You have a lot of extra advantages to protect yourself from the bad things and seek out the good things. That's the function of organizing cells into a body. Let's again apply this analogy to societies. Why does your family and my family and 20 other families all decide to settle in the same place and get along with each other? A society. Why? To protect us from those things which would be deadly to a family. That's the function. Cells get together so that cells can survive better together. Families get together so that families can survive better together, which means the function of a society, the function of a body, is to protect the parts. Not to protect itself, not to protect the whole, but to protect the parts from that which would be destructive to them. So what are some things that are destructive to a family? What's destructive to a marriage? Let's think of some obvious examples. 1, violence. Cause the death of one spouse, the marriage is gone. Cause extreme harm to one of the spouses, and their ability to do things that they should be able to do together is now utterly impeded. That marriage or that family might not survive. If, say, the primary breadwinner is suddenly, debilitatingly injured, and the other one has to spend all their time and resources caring on the one, etc. Unless the society steps in and protects them. Another example, extreme poverty. How are you supposed to do family things together if you spend literally all of your time and ability just trying to get enough money and food to survive and still not succeeding? This is how people end up in desperate situations and often as a result do terrible things. Extreme poverty results in things like, stealing to prevent starvation, or, say, being forced into a life of crime against one's wishes because it's the only way to put bread on the table. Extreme poverty. It's bad for marriages. It's bad for families. Another example, addiction or other mental illnesses. It will destroy your marriage if you become addicted to something. Why? Because all the love and attention you're supposed to be giving to your spouse goes to that other thing over there, and it sucks the life out of this relationship. And also with the relationships as well as the resources of the rest of the family. When all your money goes into this thing and all your time goes into this thing, there's not much love left for you or your kids or your spouse to share. Addiction, as well as other mental illnesses. Utterly destructive. Divorce, by definition, is death of a marriage, is the breaking apart of a marriage, or ripping the thing in two. That is always bad news in marriage. It is always bad for families. These are things that necessarily destroy families, right? Violence, poverty, addiction, mental illness, divorce. We could list others, but that's plenty for now. The reason we have a society and the reason we have a government is to protect my family and your families from those things. And the effectiveness of our society, how well we're doing as a society, can be measured very simply on this one principle. How successful is our society at protecting my marriage, my family, and your parents' marriage, your family, from these evils? Let's do a quick run through, shall we? How does our society do protecting us from violence? Honestly, pretty darn good. Even in a society where we're kind of worried about gun violence, gun deaths are still shockingly low. We're talking about hundreds or thousands of people, not hundreds of thousands of people, right? This is why we have police, and this is why we have military. The function of a police force primarily is to make sure no one inside your society attacks you or harms you. And the function of a military is to make sure no one outside your society attacks you. For the most part, you guys can leave your house, go to school, go to work, go to parties, go to concerts, and not worry about whether or not you're going to die. Way to be society. For the most part, most of the time, we're doing it right. Let's look at the next one, poverty. Extreme poverty, the kind that can force people into, having to make dreadful decisions. How is our society doing against those things? Again, I'm going to say pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. We have social security and social support programs in place that extreme poverty, the kind that results in starvation, can be ameliorated through societal benefits, through government, taxpayer-funded programs, as well as through things like local soup kitchens run by your parish. Extreme poverty is well protected against. Addiction. Well, now that's more complicated. It depends. Addiction to what? If you want help in our society against addiction to hard drugs, absolutely. Our society is very firm that hard drugs are bad and it will help protect you from them. But alcohol? Yeah, I mean, AA is a thing, but also, like, no one's going to make you go, no one's going to protect you from it. A little more of a gray area. How about pornography, which is also addictive? Ha! You gotta be kidding, right? Isn't it like a constitutional right to make and produce and publish pornography? It isn't, by the way, not in the way it's being done now, but the government hasn't taken much action on that fact. How's our government doing on that one? Oh, another totally addictive and harmful thing for families. Gambling! I can't think of any local governments that just spent millions of dollars setting up huge gambling houses, which might result in the destruction of families through addicting a member. Can you? That would be bad. Anyway, and divorce. How's our society, government doing on divorce? No backup whatsoever. They make it as easy as possible to split up. How is that helping me? How is that helping my family? It's not. It may, in some cases, be considered economically advantageous to an individual, but the fact that divorces can be had easily, yes, makes it easier to divorce, and yes, makes them more common than they need to be. That's not saying every time someone divorces they've done something wrong. There are legitimate circumstances that warrant that, but why is it so easy that you could just say, well, I decide we're no longer together, so we're going to break up and call it irreconcilable differences, there goes a marriage. That shouldn't be so easy. Government's not giving me any protection from that. Anyway, the question was good for the parts, good for a whole. And what we found was, yes, what's good or bad for the parts is good or bad from the whole, and that the function of the organization and the coordination of the things is to protect from the things that are bad. The purpose of our society is to protect us from these evils. And it's doing okay in some areas and not so good in others. Let's look at number 5. This might have seemed like an open-ended question, and in a certain sense it was, but in the context of this lecture and everything we've talked about, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Who do you love? The correct answer I want to hear from you right now is your parents. Is mom and dad. Think this through. You were born in the context of their relationship. That's where you came into existence. The fact that you have a body, that you can move, that you can feel, that you can act, that you can speak, is a gift from your parents. The fact that you have a soul and a mind, and you can think, and you can individuate, and you can process truth and realize things and develop a personality, is a gift from your parents. The fact that you can think awful things about and say awful things about your parents, criticizing and even mocking your parents, is a gift they gave you. So come on. After this video ends, before you attend the live stream, if they're home, go give mom a kiss, go give dad a hug. If they're not home, shoot them a text or an email, however it is you communicate with them. Tell them you love them. Say thank you to them. Even if they have not been great to you, and I know they always haven't, and even if you've not been great to them and you're a little embarrassed and ashamed of how you've treated them, don't worry about it. I'm serious. Treat this as an assignment. Tell mom and dad you love them. Say thank you to them. Then attend my live stream. By the way, most of you will have noticed at this point that this entire lecture is basically a really deep reflection on this one idea that the family is to society as the cell is to living bodies. Everything else follows from that one principle. And if you think that I'm being clever or that I came up with something wise by extrapolating on that idea, then you need to hear this. Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2207. The family is the original cell of social life. The family is the cell of social life, i.e. of society. Told you this book is full of wisdom, didn't I? So, You now know what you need to know to understand the fourth commandment. The fourth commandment says, honor your father and mother. We talked a lot today about what father and mother mean, about how father and mother equals marriage, equals family. We talked about the fact that father and mother is the one thing literally every human being has. That means the fourth commandment isn't just going to be about child and parent relationships. It's going to be about what it means to be a human in a family and in a society. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next lecture. What are the obligations of you to your family and your family to you? What are your obligations as a citizen of a nation to that nation and its government? And what are the obligations of that government and that society to you? But please understand, all of this presupposes that you understand the 5 little answers to our 5 quiz questions today. That the organizing principle of a society is not you or me or an individual citizen or, heaven forbid, an individual consumer. The thing our society, our country, our communities are made of are families. You were born into the context of a family. I was born into the context of a family. And that's where our love lies. It's where we came from. Fourth commandment. It's going to be about family. Thank you for tuning in. Take my assignment seriously. Reach out to mom and dad before you get into the live stream. See you soon. God bless.